My name is Nora Callahan, and I am 34 years old. I want to tell you about the Thanksgiving that changed everything, not because I won, but because of what I had to lose first. I grew up in a house in Franklin, Tennessee, where love was always distributed like a limited resource. There was never quite enough of it to go around, and somehow, from the very beginning, it was always my older sister Cassandra who got the larger share. I told myself for years that I was imagining it. I told myself that parents have different relationships with different children, that it does not mean anything, that I was being too sensitive. I believed that lie for 3 decades. Then came November, and a dining room full of 40 people, and a moment so humiliating that I cannot think about it even now without my hands going cold. But before I get there, I need to take you back to the beginning, because this story only makes sense if you understand what kind of family the Callahans were. My mother, Diane, ran the household the way a CEO runs a struggling company, with iron control, carefully managed appearances, and an absolute obsession with what the neighbors thought. My father, Raymond, was a used car dealer for most of my childhood, a man who could charm anyone in a 3-minute conversation and disappear completely the moment real intimacy was required. He was never cruel to me in any obvious way. He just looked through me, the way you look through a window when you are focused on something outside. Cassandra was the window and the view at the same time. She was beautiful in the way that makes rooms go quiet. She married a man named Derek Cullis when she was 26, a financial advisor with a wide smile and expensive shoes who my parents treated like royalty from the first handshake. They had 2 kids. They lived in a big house in Brentwood. They went to the right church and knew the right people, and as far as my parents were concerned, Cassandra had done everything correctly. I, on the other hand, had committed the unforgivable crime of wanting something different. I studied environmental science. I started a small landscaping and garden design business out of my apartment when I was 28. I drove a used pickup truck and wore dirt under my fingernails and found more meaning in watching something grow from seed than in any dinner party I had ever attended. My parents never said outright that they were ashamed of me. They did not have to. My mother used to introduce me at parties by saying, "This is Nora, she works with plants. Not landscape design, not environmental consulting. Plants, like I was tending someone's house porch ferns." For years I swallowed it. I smiled. I showed up every holiday with a casserole dish and a potted centerpiece I had grown myself, and I helped set tables and wash dishes and drove my grandmother home, and I told myself that was enough. That showing up was enough. That being the dependable one mattered, even if no one said so out loud. It did not. My grandmother, Eleanor Callahan, was the only person in that family who ever truly saw me. She was 81 years old, still sharp behind her soft eyes, still funny in that dry way that old Southern women have where you do not realize they burned you until 3 hours later. She lived in the same house she had lived in for 52 years, a pale yellow craftsman on the east side of Nashville with a garden she had tended since before my father was born. She was the reason I fell in love with growing things. I used to follow her through those flower beds when I was 5 years old, and she would explain every plant like it was a person with a history. That house was everything to her, and everything to me. Now let me take you to Thanksgiving. We gathered at my parents' house in Franklin. 41 people crowded into a house that always felt too clean for real living. A house where you were not supposed to put your glass directly on the coffee table, and the guest towels in the bathroom were decorative. I arrived at 4 in the afternoon with a roasted sweet potato dish and a hand-tied bundle of dried sage and eucalyptus I had arranged for the table. My mother opened the door, looked at the bundle, and said, "Oh, that smells interesting," in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. Cassandra arrived 20 minutes later and the house transformed. My mother came to life. My father stood up from his chair. The cousins crowded around. Derek shook hands and clapped shoulders, and the whole room reorganized itself around their entrance the way sunflowers turn toward light. I watched from the kitchen doorway, drying my hands on a dish towel, already on dish duty. My Aunt Patricia, My father's sister found me in the kitchen a little while later. She was the quiet one in the family, the one who watched more than she spoke. She caught my eye and gave me a small, tired smile, the kind that carries years of unsaid things inside it. I smiled back. We understood each other. Dinner was loud and warm, the way holiday dinners are when everything on the surface is fine. Turkey, green beans, mashed potatoes, 3 kinds of pie. My father sat at the head of the table, telling stories from the car lot. Derek was talking investments with my uncles. Cassandra was describing their upcoming vacation to Turks and Caicos, a trip my parents had contributed to, I would find out later, to the tune of $12,000. I had not been asked about my year. Not once. I had answered questions when spoken to, passed dishes when asked, refilled water glasses twice. The evening was moving along the way it always did, me orbiting the edges of my own family gathering, when my father stood up and tapped his fork against his water glass. He gave a toast. He talked about family and gratitude and the blessings of the year. He talked about hard work and the rewards that come from it. He looked at Cassandra while he said it. Then he smiled the wide salesman smile that I had known my whole life, and he said he and my mother wanted to do something special for their daughters this year. He asked Cassandra to come forward. My mother stood up with an envelope, thick and cream-colored, the kind that means something. She handed it to Cassandra with tears in her eyes and said it was a gift, a 15-day Caribbean cruise for Cassandra, Derek, and the kids, first class, all-inclusive, $12,000. The room erupted. People gasped and cheered, and Cassandra cried the photogenic kind of tears and hugged both parents at once, and Derek shook my father's hand with both of his, and everything was applause and warmth and celebration. Then my mother looked at me. She said, "Nora, come here, sweetheart." I walked forward. My face was calm. 30 years of practice. She pressed something into my hand. I looked down. A single lottery ticket. A Powerball. The $2 kind they sell at gas stations next to the beef jerky. She smiled. Not warmly. She smiled the way you smile when you have won something without saying a word out loud. "We thought this suited your situation," she said. Someone laughed. One person, then 2, then the table rippled with it. My cousin Brett made a comment about maybe I could win enough to buy a lawnmower. Derek leaned back in his chair and said something to Cassandra behind his hand, and she covered her mouth with a smile she did not quite manage to hide. I stood there holding a $2 lottery ticket in front of 41 people who were laughing, and I felt something happen inside me. Not breaking, exactly. More like the last thread of something I had been holding onto for years finally giving way. I looked at my mother's face. I looked at my father's, already turning back toward Derek. I looked at Cassandra, who was folding her cruise envelope with careful fingers. I said, "Thank you. I appreciate the thought." My voice was completely even. No one noticed what was underneath it. But my grandmother did. Eleanor Callahan was sitting at the far end of the table, and she was not laughing. She was watching me with those steady, dark eyes, and when our gazes met, something passed between us that I could not have named then. She reached out and put her hand on top of mine for just a moment, dry and warm, paper-thin skin over strong bones. Then she leaned close to my ear and said, very quietly, "Call James Whitmore this week. Write that name down." I did not know who James Whitmore was. I did not ask. I just nodded and went back to the kitchen to finish cleaning up. The rest of the evening blurred together. People stayed too late. Someone opened another bottle of wine. I washed dishes and wrapped leftovers and listened to the family laugh in the next room, and told myself, as I had told myself 100 times before, that it did not matter, that I was fine. It was almost 11 when I went looking for my grandmother's shawl, which she had left in my father's study. I found it on the arm of the wingback chair near his desk. I also found something I was never supposed to see. My father is not a neat man with his paperwork. Stacked on the corner of his desk, partially hidden under a legal pad, was a loan document. I would not have looked twice except that the name on the signature line was not just my father's, it was Derek's. And the number on the page was $160,000 at an interest rate that made my stomach turn. Predatory was a polite word for it. Below that document was another one, and when I unfolded it, the room went cold around me. It was a deed transfer, my grandmother's house. The pale yellow craftsman on the east side of Nashville that she had lived in for 52 years. Transferred as collateral against the loan. Signed 6 months ago in her handwriting, except the handwriting was not right. It was shaky and uneven in a way I had never seen from her. 6 months ago was the spring. 6 months ago, Eleanor Callahan had fallen on her back porch steps and spent 17 days in the hospital on heavy pain medication that left her confused and frightened, and not herself at all. They had made her sign it when she did not know what she was signing. I stood in my father's study for a long time without moving. Then I took out my phone and photographed every single page. I left before anyone saw me. I drove home with those pictures on my phone and the lottery ticket still in my coat pocket and something hard and clear forming somewhere behind my ribs. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I wrote down the name my grandmother had given me. James Whitmore. I looked him up. He was an estate attorney in Nashville, been practicing for over 30 years, the kind of lawyer with a quiet reputation and a long client list. I called his office on Monday morning. His assistant said he had been expecting my call. That stopped me completely. He was expecting my call. I did not say anything for a moment. Then I made the appointment. But before I sat down with James Whitmore, I called my Aunt Patricia. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she had been waiting for that too. I asked her directly whether she knew what was going on with my father's finances. She was quiet for long enough that I had my answer before she spoke. She told me she could not talk on the phone. She told me to meet her at the diner on Meridian Street, Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock. And then she said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. She said, "Nora, whatever you do not let Derek know that you know anything. Derek is not who your sister thinks he is." She hung up before I could ask what she meant. I sat on my couch with my phone in my lap. The lottery ticket was on the kitchen counter, right where I had dropped it, the night I came home from Thanksgiving. Still crumpled, the paper soft at the corners from being folded in my coat pocket. I do not know why I picked it up. Maybe it was the absurdity of it. Maybe I just needed to do something small and concrete. I picked it up, opened the Powerball app, and checked the numbers. The first number matched, the second matched. I made myself stop breathing. Third, fourth, fifth. The Powerball number, all 6. I checked the date. I checked the draw. I went to the official state lottery website and typed in the numbers by hand and watched the screen and read the result 3 times before I let myself understand what I was looking at. $212 million. I put the ticket face down on the counter. I went to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror for a solid minute. Then I went back to the kitchen, picked up the ticket, put it carefully in a Ziploc bag, and placed it inside the small fireproof box where I kept my passport and my birth certificate. And I did not tell a single person. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something. If you have ever sat at a table where you were made to feel like less, if you have ever been handed the crumbs while someone else got the feast, if any part of this story has reached into your chest and grabbed something familiar, please hit that like button right now. And if you are new here, subscribe, because this story is not over, and what happens next is something I still cannot believe when I sit quietly and think about it. Now, let me tell you about James Whitmore. His office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown, full of books and that particular smell of old paper and wood polish that makes you feel like you are somewhere serious. He was in his mid-60s, gray at the temples, unhurried in the way of a man who has seen enough to know that most things resolve themselves one way or another if you are patient. He shook my hand and asked me to sit. He did not make small talk. He told me that my grandmother had first come to see him 9 years ago. She had come without telling my mother, without telling my father. She had come because she was worried that over time, the money and the property she had spent her life building would not go where she intended it to go. She had created a trust. The trust had been accumulating for 9 years. By the time I sat across from James Whitmore in his office, it held $480,000. In my name, only my name. I asked him why. He said my grandmother's exact words, which he had written down at her request, had been, "Nora is the only one who ever came to see me when she was not expecting something." That tells me everything I need to know about where this should go. I did not cry in his office. I waited until I was in the elevator, and then I pressed my back against the wall and let it happen for about 45 seconds. And then I wiped my face and walked out into the parking garage. Then I told him about the deed. He already knew. He had been preparing documentation for the past 3 months after my grandmother had reached out to him again, frightened and uncertain, with gaps in her memory about what she had signed in the spring. He had the medical records showing her state during the hospitalization. He had the dates. He had the timing. What he had needed was a family member willing to take action, and ideally, the resources to do it. I told him about the lottery. He took his glasses off and looked at me for a moment. Then he said we had a lot to discuss. By the time I left his office that afternoon, I had the beginning of a plan. Not a revenge plan. I want to be clear about that. I had a plan to make things right. There is a difference, even if from the outside it does not always look like one. Aunt Patricia was already in the corner booth at Meridian Street Diner when I arrived on Tuesday morning. She had both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, and she looked like she had not slept well. I slid into the seat across from her, and she looked at me and said, "How much do you know?" I told her about the loan document and the deed. She closed her eyes briefly. Then she told me what she knew about Derek. Derek Hollis was not primarily a financial advisor. That was the polished version of his resume. What he actually did was connect people who needed money urgently with lenders who operated at the edge of legal and sometimes past it. He had done it for years before he married Cassandra. He continued doing it after. My father had come to him 2 years ago when the car lot started bleeding money, because Derek was family now and family helps family, and Derek had helped by becoming his creditor at a rate that guaranteed my father would never fully get out from under it. The house was the collateral Derek had always intended to collect. Patricia reached into her purse and slid her phone across the table to me without a word. On the screen was a text conversation she had accidentally seen 6 months ago, on her own birthday of all days, when she had reached for her phone in Derek's jacket at a family dinner and grabbed the wrong one. The messages were between Derek and a woman named Simone. They were not ambiguous. They were not friendly professional exchanges. They were detailed and intimate in a way that left nothing to interpretation, and one message in particular made my breath stop. It said, "Once the Nashville property transfers, I'm done with this. The paperwork is basically already drafted. She just doesn't know it yet." Nashville property was my grandmother's house. She was the she who did not know yet. I handed the phone back to Patricia. I asked her why she had not said anything to Cassandra. She looked at me with something exhausted in her eyes and said, "Because I was scared of him. And I did not know how." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. I told her she had done the right thing by telling me. I told her I was going to handle it from here. I do not know if she believed me, but she nodded. I spent the next 2 weeks doing 3 things. I worked with James Whitmore and his team to file the legal challenge to the deed transfer, supported by my grandmother's medical records and Patricia's witness account. I set up a limited liability company through which to claim my lottery winnings, keeping my name out of any public announcement. And I went to work every single day, designed 2 commercial garden spaces, answered every email, and told exactly nobody what was happening. My mother called twice. Cassandra texted once to ask if I would water her plants while they were gone because they were leaving for the Turks and Caicos trip in 10 days. I said yes. I was going to be busy watering plants and moving the largest amount of money I had ever touched in my life, but sure, I could manage her fiddle leaf figs. The trip was 14 days. All of them gone, my parents included, because my parents had also been invited. Of course they had. Derek had paid for part of their tickets too. My father had told me about it casually at Thanksgiving, as a brag wrapped in generosity. "Is not Derek just wonderful?" they had said with their eyes. On the third day they were gone, I drove to my grandmother's nursing home. She was in the common room near the window, and when she saw me, she straightened up and reached for my hand before I had even sat down. I told her about James Whitmore. I told her about the trust. I told her I knew about the deed. And then I told her about the lottery ticket. She laughed out loud. It was the best sound I had heard in months. She said, "Your mother always had a talent for irony. She just never knew it." I told her I was going to get her house back. I told her I was going to pay off the debt, clear the lien, and make sure that no one in the family could ever touch that property again. I told her about the protection clause James was drafting, that after she passed, the house would come directly to me per her original wishes, sealed in a trust that no court challenge from any family member could touch. She held my hand and looked at me for a long moment. She said, "I don't need you to punish anyone, Nora. I just need you to be okay. Promise me you won't become hard over this." I promised her. I meant it. The money cleared during the second week my family was in the Caribbean. After taxes and legal fees, the amount that landed in the LLC account was roughly $120 million. I stared at the confirmation number on my laptop screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and made dinner and watched a show and went to bed at a normal hour because that was the kind of person I wanted to stay. The deed challenge was finalized 3 days before they came home. The bank voided the original transfer based on the evidence of my grandmother's medical state at signing. The total to clear the debt and transfer the house cleanly back into my grandmother's name, with full legal protections, was just over $220,000. I paid it in a single wire transfer on a Wednesday afternoon. Then I posted a single Instagram story. Just me standing in front of my grandmother's house with a rake in my hand and a caption that said, "Starting the spring restoration on a very important garden." I knew my father checked Instagram the way some people check the news. He refreshed it compulsively when he was anxious, and he had been anxious, since Aunt Patricia had casually mentioned in the family group chat that someone local had won big on the Powerball. Someone who had bought their ticket at the Quick Mart on Harding Road, which anyone paying attention would know was 3 blocks from my parents' house, which was the same store where my mother bought her groceries and her gift cards and apparently her $2 Thanksgiving joke gifts. My phone started ringing the next morning. Mom first, then Dad, then Cassandra, then Derek, which surprised me until I remembered that Derek was always going to be thinking about money even when he was pretending not to be. I let every call go to voicemail. By end of day, I had 62 missed calls. I listened to all of them that evening, sitting on my kitchen floor with my back against and a cup of tea getting cold beside me. My mother's messages moved from sweet to confused to pressured in a progression that would have been fascinating to study in any other context. My father's were shorter, clipped, more about business and less about emotion. Cassandra's messages sounded genuinely confused, which made me feel something complicated. Derek's message was the most interesting of all. His voice was smooth and measured, and he used the phrase family investment opportunity twice, which told me everything I needed to know about exactly what he was thinking. I did not call any of them back. I texted the family group chat that evening. I said I would do a video call the following night at 7 o'clock Central Time. I said there were things I needed to share with everyone, and I needed all of them present. The confirmations came back within minutes. Every single one. I spent the next 24 hours preparing. Not my words, exactly. More like my clarity. I have spent my whole life being told I was too emotional, too sensitive, too much. So I have learned to feel things quietly and then speak from whatever is left after the feeling passes. What was left was very still. At 7 o'clock, I opened the video call on my laptop. They were gathered in what looked like a resort lounge, all of them crowded together, tropical light coming through the windows behind them, tanned and relaxed from 2 weeks of someone else's money paying for their paradise. My mother looked startled to see me. My father looked careful. Cassandra waved. Derek sat slightly apart from the group, arms folded, watching me with the expression of a man running calculations. They asked about the lottery immediately. There was no pretense. My mother dove in within the first 30 seconds, her voice wrapped in warmth that had not been there on Thanksgiving. I told them the amount. I watched their faces. My mother's hand went to her chest. Cassandra's eyes went wide. My father blinked several times. Derek's expression did not change, which was its own kind of answer. And then, before anyone could say another word, I told them there were some things that needed to be said first. I shared my screen. I walked them through the loan document. My father's name, Derek's name, the amount, the interest rate, the date. My father's face went the color of old ash. He started to say something about privacy and family business, and I kept talking. I showed them the deed transfer document. I showed them the date it was signed, the same week my grandmother had been hospitalized, and I showed them the medical records James had compiled confirming her condition at the time. I told them that the signature was not valid. I told them the house had already been legally transferred back to my grandmother. I told them the debt had been cleared. My mother said, "Nora, you cannot just." I kept talking. I pulled up the screenshots. The messages between Derek and Simone. I read part of one aloud. I watched Cassandra's face change in a way I will not describe because some things are private, even when they happen on a screen in front of you. Cassandra turned to Derek. Derek said the screenshots were fabricated. I said, "Ask Simone." He stood up and walked off camera. I watched the space where he had been sitting. I looked at my sister. She was very still. I said what I needed to say. I told my parents that I was not going to help them cover what had been done to my grandmother. I told them the house was protected now and would remain that way. I told them that what happened to the rest of their debt was not my responsibility because I had not created it. Then I closed the call. My apartment was quiet. I sat in the blue light of my laptop screen and I waited for the feeling I had imagined I would have, the clean, bright victory of it. What I felt instead was tired. A deep cellular exhaustion that had nothing to do with the evening and everything to do with the 34 years before it. There was a knock at my door 40 minutes later. Patricia. She stood in the hallway looking as wrung out as I felt. I let her in. She did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "You did what none of us were willing to do." I told her I was not sure it had mattered. She looked at me steadily. She said, "It mattered to Eleanor." My phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. It said only, "I did not know about Simone. I want you to know that. I am so sorry, Nora. I am so sorry for a lot of things." Now, if you are screaming at your screen right now, I hear you. And no, this is not where the story ends. Because what happened after that call, the things that unraveled on their own without me touching them at all, that is the part I genuinely did not see coming. So stay with me. Because karma, as it turns out, does not need much help. Cassandra filed for divorce before the cruise ship reached the Florida coast. She did not need to wait for legal confirmation of anything. She had looked at Derek's face when I pulled up those messages, and she had seen the truth of it in the 2 seconds before his expression locked back into denial. 23 years of living alongside someone teaches you things that no screenshot can, and she knew. Derek attempted to manage the story publicly. He gave his version to mutual friends. He called the screenshots fabricated and called me unstable and said I had always been jealous of Cassandra's life. It was a clean narrative if you did not know him well enough to see the seams. Simone knew him well enough. Simone, who had apparently been told that the divorce was imminent and the new life was coming, and then watched Derek reverse course completely the moment his financial scheme collapsed, was not interested in quietly depressing. She posted publicly. Not angrily, just precisely. Screenshots, timestamps, hotel receipts, a 14-minute recorded phone call that she had apparently been keeping for months like a document she always knew she would eventually need. 300 followers became 30,000 in 4 days. 2 of Derek's business associates, men who had borrowed money from him and spent years paying it back at rates that made them furious, saw the coverage and contacted a financial crimes investigator. The practices Derek had been running were not legal in Tennessee. They were not legal in Kentucky or Georgia either, where he had been operating under different names. The investigation that opened was not small. Derek Hollis did not go to prison, at least not on a timeline I can account for. But his license was suspended. His assets were frozen pending litigation. The Brentwood house, which had been in Cassandra's name, was transferred to her attorney as part of the divorce settlement, which meant Derek walked away with considerably less than he had planned on. My father declared bankruptcy 4 months after Thanksgiving. The car lot had been struggling for years, propped up by loans he could not service, and without Derek quietly backstopping certain expenses, the whole structure gave way. He and my mother moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Murfreesboro. He went to work for a dealership he used to compete against. My mother got a job doing bookkeeping for a real estate office. I know these facts because Patricia told me, not because I was watching. My mother called me in February. Her voice was not the voice I had grown up with. That voice had always had an extra layer of management to it, the careful pitch of a woman who knew exactly what impression she was creating. This voice was tired. She told me I had destroyed the family. She told me I had stood by and watched them lose everything when I had more than enough to help. She said she did not understand how I could do that to my own parents. I waited until she was finished, then I said, "Mom, I did not take your house and put it up as collateral for a secret loan. I did not make a business arrangement that put Grandma's name on a debt she did not understand. I did not stand at a Thanksgiving table and hand you a $2 lottery ticket in front of 40 people to let you know what I thought you were worth." She was quiet. I said, "I'm not going to pay for consequences that were not mine to create. But I'm also not blocking your number. If you ever want to have an honest conversation, not about money and not about blame, I'm here." She hung up. That was the last time we spoke for 7 months. My father has never called. I think about that sometimes in the quiet moments. I think about what it costs a person to simply not call. What kind of pride or shame or both makes that possible? I do not have an answer. I have decided I do not need one. Cassandra wrote me a letter in March. An actual letter, on paper, in an envelope with a stamp. I recognized her handwriting from the notes she used to slip under my bedroom door when we were teenagers, before things calcified between us into the shapes our parents needed them to be. She wrote that she was sorry. She wrote that she had known for years that I was treated differently, and she had told herself it was not her place to say anything. She wrote that she had confused silence with neutrality her whole life, and that she understood now that there is no such thing. She wrote that she was not asking for anything. She was not asking for forgiveness or money or access. She was just asking me to know that she saw it now, all of it, including the parts where she had laughed at the dinner table in November. She wrote, "You were my little sister, and I let them teach me to overlook you. I will spend a long time figuring out how to live with that." I read the letter 4 times. I folded it and put it in my desk drawer. I called her a month later. We met for coffee at a place near her new apartment in East Nashville, where she had moved with her 2 kids after the divorce. We sat across from each other, and it was awkward in the way that things are when you are rebuilding something from rubble, and you can both see the rubble clearly. We have met 7 times since then. It is not easy. It is also not nothing. My grandmother came home in April. I was there when the transport van pulled into her driveway. She had a hospital-grade wheelchair now for bad days, a walker for good ones. The garden had been through a hard winter, and I had been working on it for 2 weekends, clearing the dead growth, preparing the beds, replacing the fence posts that had rotted at the base. It was not beautiful yet, but it was ready. When the attendant helped her up the new ramp I had installed, she looked at the house for a long moment without speaking. Then she looked at the garden and she said, "It needs work." I said, "That's what I'm here for." She laughed that papery laugh, and I helped her inside. I had spent 3 weeks renovating the house before her return. New grab bars in the bathroom. A hospital bed in the first-floor bedroom, because the stairs were not something she could manage anymore. A ramp at both the front and back. A nurse who would come every morning and be available by phone overnight. The best of it. The simple, comfortable best of it. Paid for without anyone's permission, and without asking anyone's opinion. We sat in the sunroom that afternoon, watching the birds at the new feeder I had hung from the oak tree. She told me my mother had called her. She told me my mother had asked her to speak to me, to try to bring the family back together. She told me what she had said in response. She had told my mother, "Nora did not leave this family. This family left Nora a long time ago. She is the one who came back." I sat beside my grandmother in the late afternoon light, and I did not say anything for a while. Then I said, "I promised you I would not become hard." She looked at me. She said, "You haven't. Hard people don't cry in sunrooms." She was right that I was crying. I had not noticed until she said it. A year has passed since that Thanksgiving. My landscape firm has 3 employees now, a real office space, and more work than I can take on cleanly. I designed a public garden installation for a community center in North Nashville this spring, and I got to watch kids play in it on the opening weekend, which was the best afternoon I have had in recent memory. The lottery money sits mostly in investments. I bought a small house 12 minutes from my grandmother's. I have a dog, a hound mix named Maple, who destroys exactly 1 garden bed per week with absolute consistency and no remorse. The foundation I started carries my grandmother's name. The Eleanor Callahan Fund Awards grants to young women in creative and environmental fields who come from families that did not understand what they were building. The application requires 1 letter describing what they would create if money were not a barrier. I read every one personally. Some of them are the most honest documents I have ever held in my hands. People ask me if I am happy. I tell them I am free, which is adjacent to happy but sturdier. I think about the moment at that Thanksgiving table when my mother put that lottery ticket in my hand and smiled her particular smile. I think about her certainty in that moment, her absolute conviction that she had summed me up correctly and found me small. I think about the way the table laughed, and I think about the fact that the ticket she chose to hand me at the store she chose to go to on the day she chose to go there was worth $212 million. The universe does have a sense of humor. It is just very slow and very precise. If you are watching this and you have sat at a table where you were handed the crumbs, I want to say something to you directly. You do not need a lottery ticket. You do not need a dramatic reversal. What you need is one decision. The decision to stop organizing your life around the approval of people who have already decided who you are. That decision costs nothing. It is also the hardest thing I have ever done, but I did it, and I would do it again. And I would do it in front of 40 people if I had to. My name is Nora Callahan. I am 34 years old. I design gardens for a living. I take care of my grandmother. I am slowly learning how to be a sister again. And I am the woman my family accidentally made when they handed me a $2 lottery ticket and thought they were showing me my place. They were right. They just could not see the place they were pointing to yet. I am going to go water my grandmother's garden now. It is coming in beautifully this spring. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this. If this story touched something real in you, drop it in the comments. Tell me about a table you walked away from, or one you are still sitting at and trying to figure out how to leave. I read everything, and if you are new here, subscribe and hit the notification bell because the next story coming to this channel is unlike anything I have posted before. You will want to be here for it. Until next time, know your worth. And do not let anyone hand it back to you in a $2 envelope with a smile.